premise is simple. Take some of the greatest American game show contestants, put them all in a big giant tournament, where they need to answer difficult questions before time runs out. Add a fun little lifeline.
Switch.
Find yourselves a winner and print money. And yet, despite the success, this show was never replicated nor duplicated ever again. This is the story of Grand Slam, the greatest game show tournament you've probably forgotten about. We start not in the US, but rather the UK. Grand Slam was initially a British thing that aired in the UK in 2003. Same premise, virtually same format, same intense battles between some of Britain's best, and most importantly, virtually the same rules. There were 5 rounds: general knowledge, numbers and logic, contemporary knowledge, words and letters, and the final round that consisted of all 4. Each contestant starts with a 1-minute timer that effectively works like a chess clock. As time ticks away, contestants must answer questions correctly and quickly in order to stop their timer from running down to 0. Each contestant also has a series of switches which basically work as you'd expect. Yell switch and do this.
Switch.
Whoever runs out of time first loses, and the winner keeps their remaining time for the final round. With all of this in mind, the original version of Grand Slam had some serious potential to be more than just a one-season wonder. But that's exactly what it became, and it would have been thrown into the television ether, if not for its reincarnation across the Atlantic. Produced by Michael Davies, the same man responsible for bringing Millionaire to the States and debuting on the Game Show Network in August 2007, Grand Slam US was determined to find out the very best in the realm of game shows.
Welcome to Grand Slam, where television history will be made.
And you know this tournament was serious because 2 of the participants were Brad Rutter and Ken Jennings. At the time, the 2 greatest Jeopardy players. Rutter is more known nowadays for a finger point and a score, but that's a different story for another video. But in 2007, he was still in his prime and had beaten Ken in the 2005 Ultimate Tournament of Champions. That, plus the fact that he won more money than Ken, meant that he was the top-seeded player of the tournament. Ken, though, was ranked 2nd, and to vastly undersell his career, he was so good at Jeopardy that he then became the host. Not to be outdone, however, were 2 other Jeopardy champions that were pretty much the old guard: Frank Spankenberg and Leszek Pavlovich. Spankenberg was the first person to win over $100,000 in a 5-day reign. Remember that when Spankenberg competed, 5-day reigns were the maximum allowed, and the board values were also at their original prices. Then there was Leszek Pavlovich, who once described himself as the Homer Simpson of game shows. Pavlovich, however, won the 1992 Jeopardy Tournament of Champions and racked up over $75,000 in his 5-day reign. There were 4 Millionaire winners: John Carpenter, the first ever $1 million winner and noted phone-a-friend user.
I don't really need your help, I just wanted to let you know that I'm gonna win the $1 million.
Nancy Christie, the lone female winner of Millionaire. Ed Toutant, Millionaire's greatest redemption story. Coming back after receiving a bad question, Ed would win over $1.8 million. And finally, Kevin Olmsted. Nearly 25 years later, Kevin is still the only person to have won over $2 million on US Millionaire. There was also Ogie Ogas, a neuroscientist that won $500,000 on Syndicated Millionaire. And he would have won it all too, if he didn't back away. There was also David Legler and Raheem Oberholzer, who both won over $1 million on the revival of 21, that was hosted by Maury Povich. Yes, that Maury Povich. Tom McKee, who won a crap ton of money and cars on Tic-Tac-Toe, and for also having the longest win streak on an American game show before Ken Jennings. There was even a literal game show Ronin in the form of Phyllis Harris.
You know, nothing on a game show is going to throw her. She's been on like 58 game shows.
And finally, there were the underdogs, the 3 contestants with the least money won out of the bunch, but were thus looking for a potential upset, such as Michelle Kitt, who won $107,500 on Weakest Link. At 15th and 16th were 2 competitors representing perhaps the most obscure shows out of the bunch: Victor Lee from the World Series of Pop Culture and Amy Kelly from Lingo. In any event, this was a stacked lineup that saw a total of $17 million combined between the contestants. As a result, instead of being seeded based on IQ, they were instead seeded based on money count. Not the greatest solution, sure, but it did guarantee the possibility of an upset or 2. With everything in place, all we needed to do now let's get this tournament started. The first round matchups were mostly filled with unsurprising outcomes and a bit of kinks and changes to the system. For one, the contemporary knowledge round was dropped, meaning that each game would consist of 4 rounds instead of 5. On to the matches themselves, and we start with Amy and Brad. Amy versus Brad was what you'd expect when a word whiz, that's what the show called her, faced off against an undefeated Jeopardy champion. Brad would sweep Amy 4-0, but the second round, Numbers and Logic, turned into a surprisingly close affair that saw Brad squeak out with just over 4 seconds remaining. Ken versus Victor actually started with a first round win for Victor, before he badly lost the Numbers and Logic round, at which point any hope of a comeback was pretty much lost, albeit Victor still made it pretty close. David and John defeated Frank and Tom respectively, though both encountered several problems with Numbers and Logic. And while Phyllis and Ogi's wins against Raheem and Nancy were technically upsets, both encountered no problems whatsoever with Numbers and Logic. And when you consider that Phyllis had more game show experience compared to Raheem, and that Ogi, who studied prior to his Millionaire appearance, studied again for Grand Slam, their upset victories were not as big as you think. Up next was the matchup between Ed and Leszek. Leszek comfortably won the first round. The second round, however, would produce my favorite moment in the entire tournament, because on the very first Numbers and Logic question,
what is 2.4 times 4.2?
Switch. 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 Pass.
10.08.
already a chaotic start, Ed would then forget to answer the very next question that was given to him, and if you can't tell that he was flustered, he certainly was now. Ed would later use his last remaining switch later on in the numbers round, which ultimately meant nothing as he would lose to Leszek and be in even worse position entering the latter half of the match. A half that Ed would end up losing as Leszek was able to pull off the upset sweep. And then came the 3-14 matchup, Kevin and Michelle. And early on, Kevin was turning this match into a runaway, banking 29.66 seconds entering round 3. Michelle though would bounce back with a crucial third round win. Still, Kevin had the momentum, the time, and an equal amount of switches with Michelle as the final round commenced. Halfway through, however, things became slightly more interesting.
How many prime numbers are there between 4 and 20?
Switch.
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 3.
6.
Still, despite every switch being burnt, Kevin had a sizable advantage and was able to push Michelle into the red zone. All he needed to do now was answer 1, maybe 2 more questions correctly.
Tijuana.
Zihuatanejo. If Butch weighs 260 pounds and can lift 40% of his body weight, how many pounds can he lift?
Pass.
What member of the current first family received a bachelor's degree in English from the University of Texas?
Mrs. Bush.
Jenna Bush. Spell salacious.
S-A-L-I-C-I.
S-A-L-A. Kevin, the land bounded by the Euphrates and Tigris rivers was once known by what Greek name meaning between the rivers?
Mesopotamia.
Correct.
Well, shit.
30.
Correct. Kevin, Joaquin Phoenix played Kevin, you're out of time. Johnny Cash is the final answer.
Thus, through a combination of a clutch third round victory and horrendous luck for Kevin, Michelle was able to pull off the upset and the biggest comeback so far in this tournament, as we entered the quarterfinals. First up was Ken and Phyllis, and oh my, it's already over. Michelle and John's matchup was a lot more interesting on paper though. Both struggled mightily in the numbers round, which meant that it was up to who could bank more time on rounds 1 and 3. Yet it would be Michelle that would ultimately win round 1 with an impressive margin of victory. Entering the numbers round though, both were more than a little bit anxious, especially John.
Even though I work for the Internal Revenue Service, math doesn't really enter into it in my daily life because I do have a calculator and I know how to use it.
Unfortunately, he couldn't use his calculator, and he once again struggled. Michelle did have her rough patches too, but when the round came to an end, she banked over 10 seconds worth of time again. This was starting to turn into yet another runaway. But a comeback was still very much possible. John was literally staring at the person responsible for the biggest one thus far. All he needed to do now was bank a good chunk of time and oh my goodness, it's now very much over. John was dealing with a 50-second disadvantage entering the final round, but he still had a 3-1 advantage in switches, and later on, a 3-0 advantage in switches. However, in a move that fits John so well as a game show contestant, he would only use 1 of his 3 switches, effectively sealing his fate as Michelle Kidd's second upset victim. The other end of the bracket saw two even more interesting matchups, and we start with David and Leszek. This was a much closer affair at the start of the match, and early on in the second round, both men showed equal strength at numbers and logic. Only a single mistake could cause a drastic shift in momentum, and unfortunately for Leszek, he would make that mistake.
46.
56.
Leszek would proceed to spend way too much time before answering this question wrong, then spend way too much time before answering this question right. Keep in mind that he still had some switches to use, and we know that he'll gladly use them if need be. But by the time he finally used one, it was far too late, and to make matters worse, it would be rendered useless, as David would immediately answer correctly. With that, the round came to an end with David now having a sizable lead and gaining all the momentum that Leszek had. Momentum that he would keep on his side as he was able to breeze through the following two rounds to advance to the semis. Which leads us to Brad and Ogi. Despite the fact that this was a battle between 1 versus 9, Brad's weakness in numbers and logic was one that Ogi was looking to capitalize on. And by the end of the first round, the need to do just that grew even more after losing badly. If Ogi were to flip the script, he would have to do so in round 2. And boy did he ever.
What is 1/7 of 224?
Switch. 32.
Correct. Ogi, what is 52 minus 26 minus 13?
13.
Correct. What's the dollar value of 7 quarters and 3 dimes?
205.
Correct. Two lines that are in the same plane and never cross are what kind of lines? What is the new price?
Switch. Switch back. Switch back. Pass.
371. Ogi, what does x equal in this equation?
40.
Correct. Brad, a building measuring 262 yards tall. Brad, you're out of time. The correct answer to this question,
39 seconds. A massive victory for Ogi that tipped the scales in his favor, and Ogi knew it.
Brad does math like a little girl, and after the end of the math round, I know that there's no chance he's going to take the game away from me. The game's mine for sure.
Gloating is an interesting choice given that we are halfway through the match, and with words like this, Ogi has effectively turned heel. Our face in this analogy is now behind by 21 seconds and some change, but a good showing in words and letters could make things interesting entering the final. And that's exactly what Brad does, banking 14 seconds and some change to take with him into the final. With Ogi ahead of Brad by a narrow margin and 2 switches still in possession by both men, a close match seemed to be inevitable. Instead, Brad immediately got himself into a hole, while Ogi did a great job pressuring Brad, answering questions in a timely manner, whilst also using a timely switch on a math question he knew Brad would either struggle or pass, with Brad doing the latter. With Brad's timer running down faster and faster, it was only a matter of time before the end came to fruition.
The correct answer is Jefferson City, Missouri. Brad, you're out of time.
If you thought I was being a bit dramatic by using pro wrestling terms such as heel and face, this celebration alone is why I use such an analogy. Sure, this little arm celebration might have been a bit too much, Brad doesn't seem to mind and he'll later be the victim of something a lot more iconic, but these comments indicate that viewers certainly despised Ogi's little dance. His trash talk, really just his overall attitude, but it's these reactions that make Ogi the perfect villain for this show, and thus make this show just a tad more special. Ogi is the bad guy, and it's now up to these 3 heroes to potentially stop him. Unlike in pro wrestling, this sort of dilemma isn't solved by a fatal 4-way. Instead, we move on to the semifinals, starting with Ken versus Michelle.
Ken Jennings. Who was that again?
Your final answer is Clint Eastwood. Michelle, you're...
It ends as swiftly as you'd expect. And the same can be said for David's run, suffering a clean sweep in a match that might have had some ongoing tension between him and Ogi, who, would you look at that, is emoting again. And thus, the finals were set. Ken Jennings, Ogi Ogas, hero, villain, face, heel, winner, take all. And when the first round commenced, it was immediately apparent that this had the makings of being a classic.
What organisms are made up of algae and fungi living together symbiotically? Correct. The Thinker was the work of what?
Rodin.
Correct. Ogi, human hair is mostly made out of what protein?
Keratin.
Correct. Ken, the 2 dots sometimes placed over vowels in the German alphabet.
Umlaut.
Correct. What state did Rebecca Felton represent for 24 hours in 1922, becoming the first female U.S. senator in history?
Switch. Georgia.
Correct. Ken, what vestigial human organ shares its name with the term for supplemental
Appendix.
information? Correct. Confederate Civil War General Thomas Jackson was better known by what? Correct. What notoriously romantic character has been depicted in works by Mozart, Lord Byron, and George Bernard Shaw? Correct. Ken, in a scientific litmus test, what color does the paper turn? The final answer was red. Ken, you're out of time. Ogie, you keep 14 100ths of a second to take you to the final round.
With the first round effectively a draw, the numbers and logic round would basically decide the tournament. And while Ogie showed supreme dominance in this round, Ken was a software engineer, as many Americans likely knew given that they were told about him being won 75 times. In essence, what Ogie could not afford was to make this round a close one.
Ogie, what is 8 times 0.75?
6.
Correct. Ken, 0.0625 inches. The final answer is 1/16. Ken, you're out of
However,
time.
that's exactly what he does, and he now had an effective 3-second advantage over Ken. Surely though, he would bounce back in the words and letters round.
Can either Ken or Ogie take charge in a category they've never faced before?
Oh wait, I forgot. Remember how I said that the original UK version had 5 rounds, and that the US version dropped one of them? Well, that's about to change, because the producers decided to include the Contemporary Knowledge round back into the tournament, exclusively for the finals. Contemporary Knowledge was effectively a pop culture round, and Ogie struggled mightily. Ken saved 48 seconds, an ungodly amount of time that basically planted the seeds for the inevitable. And honestly, there's no further reason to dramatize this further. Ogie, for the first time this tournament, has lost all of his confidence, and eventually he loses to Ken in the final 2 rounds.
Ogie, you're out of time. Ken Jennings is the 2007 Grand Slam champion.
Wow, just amazing! Ken Jennings has done it again!
And that was basically it. Grand Slam never aired again, and it's honestly quite a shame. We've seen many different contestants, particularly Jeopardy contestants, who've proven their worth and won huge sums of money. Just imagine the potential dream matches if a new Grand Slam occurred. James versus Brad to finally settle the score. In any event, while we might never again have a tournament with such prestigious names and such a grand amount of money, I hope I was able to tell you the story of a show and a tournament you've either never heard of before or have completely forgotten about. One that would be amazing to bring back, but for now is just another show left in the ethers of television history.
Rado Barker.